All right. Once again, we have liftoff. I'm only laughing because this is our second attempt. We had some technical glitches before, but I want to formally welcome once again my man Harley on the podcast for his second appearance. Harley's a veteran of the punk rock, hardcore, motorcycle, chopper, and all the things that matter. He's a veteran of those scenes, and he was on the show before. We talked about motorcycle stuff, but this time we're going to get into a little bit of weird stuff. Yeah, man. But it was good catching up last time. Like I was saying before, when we
Yeah.
started this the first time, we got a lot of good reviews and a lot of good response off that episode. People were stoked on it, and like I said, we hadn't talked in a while, so like we were talking a lot before and after the episode, and then like when everything was said and done, you were like, dude, I got some weird shit to talk about. So
I have a I have
here
a
we
lot
are.
of I have a lot of weird shit. Believe it or not, this is like the first. Well, there's very few people that I talk about it with.
Yeah,
Um, so it's kind of like my in small circles I'll say some shit occasionally, but
yeah,
this is probably like the first time I guess that the world's gonna hear of a bunch of weird odd shit that's
yeah,
happened
yeah.
over my years. So
Yeah. The first time people hear the campfire stories.
yeah. I mean, obviously I'm a firm believer that there's other stuff besides just here.
Yeah,
What we perceive. And I guess I've been lucky enough to have weird shit happen to me over over the years.
yeah. So, why don't we start from from the beginning? Like, um, well, first of all, I guess maybe, and maybe this is, I don't know if this is too personal, but you said you're a firm believer that there's more going on than the surface level stuff here.
Yeah.
Like what kind of is your belief system? Like, what do you
Well,
think is out there, or what do you think's going on?
I mean, first and foremost, like right off the rip, to say that we're the only like intelligent beings in the universe is ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I mean that alone is just, I mean, it's pretty selfish of human beings to think that we're the only thing in the universe.
yeah,
I mean, I'm like also a firm believer that like you know that the level that we're at, we're all gods. And that might be a weird thing for people to hear, but when you consider the feats that we did and how many millions of years that we've been on Earth, um, it's amazing to think that. But I'm a firm believer of like frequencies and stuff like that. So I mean, I think everything what we perceive is probably at a certain frequency that everybody perceives something at. The human beings perceive something at. And then you could essentially like a radio tune into a different station occasionally. you know
sure,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I mean that's kind of the thing that I believe, where it's like this weird thing where everything just kind of aligns in like a at a point in time, and you get to see in 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 another frequency. So that's kind of the thing that I believe. I don't necessarily. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around a lot of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Like dimensions and all that stuff, where like people talk about like everything's happening in a different dimension at the same time that it's happening here. But to me, it's a little bit easier kind of just to be like, oh, it's a different frequency. We just tune into it, or we have an enlightened moment where you end up being somewhere in something that happens at a different frequency.
sure, yeah. And there's a lot out there where people are getting into that and researching different facets of frequency stuff. Just to circle back to one thing you mentioned earlier, um, when you said we're all gods, do you mean we're all like kind of? Do you believe we're all individual gods, or do you think that we're all part of the same big kind of, for lack of a better word, supreme thing?
Um, I mean, I think we have the power to be part of a supreme thing. I
Yeah,
think I think, going back 10,000 years, or like, like different civilizations, I think that's kind of how the civilizations worked. I think nowadays, like, everybody's so um, not in tune with anything. A lot of people not in tune with themselves, and are just kind of taking, everything face value. So, I don't, essentially, I'm not saying that like we're a god, like, people think of like a religious god, but I'm
Yeah.
saying like,
Capital G God. Yeah.
yeah. I'm saying like, to consider like what we do, and like how your brain functions, and all, like your heart and your electrical system and all this stuff. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, you know, b- mammals are kind of like a supreme being in a way, even just to think like on such a small level, to think that like you can talk to yourself in your head and nobody else can hear you, but you're talking to yourself in your head.
Yeah.
Where just thinking about that is kind of a weird thing, where you're like, well, yeah, like I understand what I'm thinking in my head, but nobody else is hearing what I'm saying in my head.
Yeah.
So I mean, if that makes any sense, then that's kind of like what you know where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Do you have because I know that, did you ever see that there's people when they do research, like there's only a certain number or a certain percentage of the population that has an actual voice in their head? Do you just kind of process thoughts as a thing, or do you hear like an actual
Oh, I hear like
voice?
actual voice in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. Isn't it? This is the weird shit, right? Because this is like the shit that you start talking about at 4 in the morning but like it's weird to be doing it at like 7 at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this is the stuff like where like I'm gonna curse everybody listening to this now, like um with this I don't know, for lack of a better word, exercise, right? Like you just said, like you hear stuff in your head, like you thinking about stuff and you're like, how am I doing this? Or like then it gets even weird. It's like, how am I moving my hand right now? I'm like showing
Yeah.
you my hand and I'm doing this, but I have no idea how I'm doing this, and I'm doing
Yeah.
it as I'm fucking talking to you right here. Like,
Yeah.
fucking this is crazy. Like that stuff will keep me up all night. Like, and then
Yeah.
I'll have to like do something to shut off, because then it's like it just goes on and on and on.
Right. That's like if you've ever gotten like ridiculously high before, where you start thinking like, oh, dude, like how am I doing this? Or you can't function and move your hand, where you're like, why is my hand not moving, but my brain's telling my hand to move, but like I'm not
Yeah.
functioning like I should be. There's like a disconnect between the two, and it's like, man, this is really weird. So yeah, to some degree, I feel like, um I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do on a regular basis, we just don't even think about. It's like, it's like to
No.
think that your heart beats all the time, dude, for, how 78, not 80 years of your life, or 90 years of your life, and you have no control over it. It's just doing it by, it's like just functioning,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
which is weird. Like, it's weird. I mean, it's not like ghosts and shit like that, but it's still weird stuff.
Yeah, the shit going on inside you is weird stuff. Like the design, the grand design of like the human form, or like you said, any like mammal or whatever form, like everything that's going on, all the systems that are in place that are working together at one thing. And it's miraculous that more stuff doesn't go wrong, right? Like,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is- you know,
yeah.
um, but yeah, so yeah, when you're talking about frequency, and I know this is at a different level, there's like a lot of stuff been coming out. Have you I don't know if you're up on or not, but it's just an interesting side, because I know you're an old music guy too. um about the frequency of music, and like how it's recorded, and at what frequency kind of can kind
Yeah,
of dictate stuff that's going on with music. And they're saying
yeah.
that a lot of stuff now is like recorded at a real like low frequency. It kind of brings people down, like it's not like, for lack of a better word, uplifting like
Yeah,
music.
I think they said, like, I could be wrong, dude. So I mean, I've done some research on it. As a matter of fact, like, I was just hanging out with Sean Martin, like, the other day, who used to play in Hatebreed, he plays in Twitching Tongues now. We were talking about hertz, and I was saying, I was like, dude, like, I was like reading all this stuff about frequencies, and like, I think music is like at 400 and something hertz. I think, I don't remember, I don't remember exactly. And then they were saying like people could relate to it because that's the frequency that we're supposed to hear at. But like cell phones, televisions, like digital stuff is like at 130 hertz or something, which is really low. And what it does is it causes, they say that it causes chaos with people. So I was saying to Sean, I was like, dude, can you imagine if you could figure out all these weird frequencies and then like record something in the studio, like some death metal shit that like really fucking like makes people super depressed or like, you know, and we were talking about it, and it's pretty interesting to think, you know, because everything does, you know, there is frequencies, especially like with all, you know, you see like science where people like start like, you know, like recording frequencies from like plants and stuff like that, and you know, everything does have a frequency. So I mean, I essentially I can see how something like that would cause turmoil in somebody, you know. And I have a list of, on my phone actually, like I screen grabbed a list of like all the frequencies and what they're supposed to do, and they say different frequencies have healing powers as well.
Yeah, like the one the monks chant at and stuff like that, the Tibetan monks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Two things with this that are just kind of dumb, like that'll be funny as a side. You ever hear of the brown tone? Speaking of frequencies,
no, I have not.
There's supposed to be a frequency that basically makes you shit your pants, right? So that was like when you were talking about like trying to make some death metal that's like all weird and stuff. There was a running joke with me and my boy Ryan that passed away a couple years ago. We always wanted to do a band and find that tone, that frequency, the brown tone, and just put that in a song. Just like when anyone listens to it, they just shit their pants. Like just like
that would be amazing. That would, and there, you know, there's the thing too is it's like, have you ever done, you know, like to some degree, I'm not like a hippie, but I'm like into like alternative stuff. I'll try like anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I mean, this is super personal, but I, you know, when I lost my parents, I was having a lot of trouble with a lot of stuff, and I was going to therapy, and my therapist said, you know, like therapy can only take you so far because there's like these deep rooted things that sometimes your psyche can't get to, you know. And even if you're talking and doing all this stuff, it's so deep inside your brain that you can't kind of reach it. So she, you know, so my wife Sarah was like, let's go to sound healing, you know. And I was like, yeah, whatever, you know, like I'll try sound healing. So we went to sound healing, and if any of your viewers don't know sound healing, it's basically like crystal bowls in different, you know, in different things where they use frequencies and tones, you know, and people get different stuff out of it, you know, whether it's relaxation. I've taken friends and I'm like, listen, dude, if you just get an hour of like sleep out of it, dude, that's all, like you're good.
Yeah.
You don't have to have like an epiphany from it. It's just relaxing, and it, you know.
Sometimes just removing yourself from the day-to-day grind and take an hour to do that, even if it's like you said, like even if it's not something that you're sold on, just removing yourself from regular life for an hour and relaxing and like having else go on will be beneficial for you.
Exactly. So it's like, you know, I think a lot of people with a lot of stuff are like, dude, that's bullshit, whatever. And it's like, just kind of take it for face value if you're going to do it, you know? So, so we went, and I went to this dude who was super amazing. We went in, and, you know, it was like an hour of like him, like on these crystal bowls and just like, you know, kind of bringing you in kind of out of consciousness a little bit, dude. And when I got done with it, I was literally bawling, dude. I was crying so hard that I was laying down, obviously, on the floor, dude. I had tears in my ears, like just massive release, and it was like, it was unintentional. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't anything that was really like set in stone. I was like, I'm gonna go in here and cry. I went in with the intention that nothing was gonna happen. I was like, yeah, this is probably bullshit, but like I'll relax for an hour. And
Yeah.
it literally, it literally, whatever frequency or vibration that tone was at, it literally just kind of like released all this trauma and all this, pent up sadness that I had in me, and it was amazing, and I couldn't explain it. So it's just kind of this weird thing. So,
Yeah.
again,
Did you find yourself in like a meditative state when you were
yeah,
there?
kind of, like, and that's the weird thing about, like, with the vibrations. It's like you literally can feel the vibration, like, in your, like, from these tones at your feet, and kind of like move up your body into your head. It's really weird,
Mm.
um and even people that I've taken that didn't get that much, what I got out of it, they still said the same thing. They were like, wow, man, like you could really feel the vibration of these tones, whereas with, I think with music, sometimes you can get that, if you see a band live, or see somebody performing live, but it's very rare that you can kind of be in a state of mind where you can actually like assess what's going on and be like, whoa, dude, this is really weird.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. That seems like one of those things where there's gonna be people, I don't know how to explain this. Like anything kind of like that alternative or like new age type therapy, there's gonna be real people. And I feel like there's a lot of room for abuse in that kind of
Yeah,
realm.
yeah, yeah,
There's gonna
yeah,
be
for
some
sure.
yanny motherfuckers like trying to like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, but that's cool that you found something like a legit spot and got
yeah.
stuff. And did you have to ever go back, or did it like
I
that
went,
release?
I went back a bunch. I just went back because I enjoyed doing it, and not
Yeah,
every time was like that. The dude that did the dude that did it, was this dude, Kelvin, and he was like, old school kind of like, just kind of like into like hip hop and stuff like that. And then he ended up going to jail, and kind of was just like, dude, I, had two options. He kind of found a lot of alternative medicine, I guess, in there, and started doing some stuff to help himself,
yeah,
and started doing the sound therapy. So it's kind of this thing where I was like, well, this dude is kind of legit, because he's like kind of cut from the same cloth. He's not some like,
yeah,
no offense, but he's not some
yeah,
like rich chick that's like, her,
mm,
like, kind of like living off dad's money, or a
yeah,
trust fund kid, where they're just like, yeah, I have nothing better to do. I'm just gonna get into new age
yeah,
medicine. He was
yeah,
just I was like, yo, dude. I was like, this dude's kind of like a legit dude,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
That's cool.
And I think, like you said, I think there's a lot of room for people. And hey, whatever you get out of some, I'm definitely not like doubting anybody or anything. Whatever you get out of it, you get out of it. Whether it's like these people are kooks or not, it's like what you take from it is what you take from it.
And it's also your mindset going in, like, because you're gonna get out of it what you want or need if you apply that kind of mindset to whatever it is you're going into, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try most anything, like for the most part. Like I'm down to try, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
whatever. If I get something out of it, cool. If I don't, then it's an experience. So it,
yeah,
it is what it is. But I think there's a lot to be said. I think a lot of people just kind of forget about their bodies and what you're capable of doing and what you're capable of achieving in your mind. There's like this disconnect where people just don't realize. It's like often people, you hear people saying like, oh, like I had this health issue and I didn't even know I had it. And you're like, dude, how did you not know that you had that?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like you can't tell that your body is not, there's something messed up with it. And I just think it's like not being in tune with your mind and kind of your body being in tune with the same thing. Which sounds like hippie shit, dude. I know, but you know,
No, but there's like, no, it's real, like, because there's times like if I'm distracted or I'm stressed or I'm like running full tilt, like, and like, you know, I go to the gym every day and stuff, like, well, 5 days a week, every day during the
Yeah,
week.
yeah,
And it's like if I'm not in tune, like it's not the same. Like, if you're not mindful of everything, it's easy to be numb to stuff, especially
yeah,
when you're not taking time to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, to reconnect or connect all that stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you go into that for an hour, and you're experiencing frequencies and like you're feeling it and it's going through you and stuff, is you're removing yourself from the day-to-day rat race. When you people caught up in the rat race, like they can be less in tune with things, like,
Oh,
you know physically, mentally, psychologically,
for
emotionally,
sure.
whatever, you
And
know what I
and
mean?
and, and I really didn't like. I really didn't. I come from like, I mean, I'm sure people listen to the last podcast. Like, I grew up skateboarding and BMX and snowboarding and motocross and all that shit. Where it's just like, you know, you're focused on what you're doing, and you get hurt and you get up and you just like you either you either heal from it, but you're not really like. I mean, your brain is programmed to just like just to do things. You're programmed not to feel pain. Like you program yourself to not feel pain. You program yourself to like get up regardless of what happens and try it again and try it again and try it again until you kill yourself. And it's like it wasn't really until like my wife kind of was like, you know, taught me, and I'm still not good at it. I still go back to the same shit where I'm just like grinding it out, but I feel like at least knowing some stuff now, it's like, meditation. I can't meditate. Like, I can't, like, I'm not really good at it. I try, but I'm not really good at it. Um, but it's been around for thousands of years. So how can how can you discredit something that's been around that long? And the gurus and and the monks and all these people that have done it, like it, it's got to do something because they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. And then some of that stuff, you ever see stuff that like Tibetan monks and stuff do, like with like, or different monks from around the world do when they're in meditative states, like where they'll stay outside in the on the top of the mountain in snow for like 4 days, and you see all the snow's melted around them, and they're just like sitting still in it. Like
Yeah,
the stuff that you can do if you apply yourself, and like you said, if you got all systems connected, is can be phenomenal. But in our world, the modern world, like we're doing a lot of low vibration stuff that
yeah,
just
yeah,
dulling a lot of it, like the food you eat, like not you, I'm saying in
yeah,
general,
yeah,
like
yeah. In general, yeah,
food that has all additives and GMOs and water with fluoride and blah blah blah.
right,
It
right.
sounds like all hippy dippy stuff, but it's all real. And all you gotta do is basics. Spend 10 minutes searching that if you think we're talking about dumb shit, like, and it's all there for you to see, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You said TV, like it's set at that wavelength of that, where, I find if you go out and you veg out and you're just watching TV for like 3 hours, like you've done nothing, and you can feel that you're like you've just shut
Exactly.
off. You feel numb. You don't even feel like you're just like
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
You
I think a lot of a lot of for us, like especially our age group, it was like, dude, what, like, we're like latchkey kids, man. It's like, what did you do? It's like you either did two things. You either went home, played video games, watched television, or you were outside skateboard. Like some of us
Yeah,
were outside skateboarding and BMX and shit like that, or causing trouble, lighting
getting
shit on
shit. Yeah,
fire.
yeah, yeah,
But I mean, so I think it's just programmed, and I think like I think of the first step for a lot of people is if you cut that stuff out, you'll automatically feel more motivated and all this other stuff. And the weird thing is I mean, I don't want to get off track, but I feel like you know going back to like the if we kind of segue into like the paranormal thing, for me, it like a lot of stuff started when I was really young,
yeah,
and I feel like and you'll see where I'm going with this. I feel like when you're young, like 4, 5, 6, when you just start like being able to kind of like not think on your own, but like have thoughts and do stuff like that.
Yeah, when your brain's really getting booted up, right?
Yeah. You have no like you don't have any. There's no guidelines that are already set for you.
Yeah, there's no years of experience that you just rely on that rather than what's ahead of you.
Yeah, so I think like you end up being in tune more with a lot of stuff. So like when they say like, oh, like kids will will see things that grown up people don't see, or which was kind of like not necessarily me when I was young, but like there was weird shit that happened to me when I was a kid that was unexplained. Still to this day, I can't explain it. I can't say that that I believe in it or I don't believe in it, but it happened. And I think like, you're not programmed to not, we're so, as young adults, we start getting into, going into school, and then you start getting like structure, and that structure doesn't allow you kind of to like think or allow stuff to happen, or you to be able to pick up these different frequencies necessarily, because you're kind of being like guided in some way where it's like this thoughtless process of just like I guess structure, where it's like, no, that's not real. When you're a kid, anything's real, dude. You're like, oh, like you could pick up a stick and make it a gun.
Yeah.
Or you can do anything that you want to do, or you could think however you want to do. So I think that allows you to be able to process a lot of things and maybe experience stuff that you're later in life you can't, because you're so bombarded with this outside frequency, and all this stuff happening in the world that just kind of like doesn't allow you to focus on, or to allow you to let this stuff kind of come in.
No, absolutely, yeah. And there's a lot of people that talk about that, and researchers that say that and even in regular life, anecdotally, right? Like you always see like kids and dogs, man, are always looking at something that isn't there, right? Because dogs do the same shit, right? Like
dogs. Well,
my dog will freak me the fuck out. It'll be 2 a.m. I'll be sitting there with her, and all of a sudden she's looking at something. I'm like,
yeah, my dog's the same way. It's like,
like what are we gonna go? What are we gonna do?
I like Buddhists, the Buddhist religion. I mean, I've briefly studied certain different religions a little bit. The Buddhist religion, they say that like cats and dogs are the in reincarnation, they're the step before becoming human. The next reincarnation from a dog or a cat is a human being. But they're also don't have the structure that we have. So the ability, it allows them to kind of tune into different stuff that we don't necessarily see. So, and that's why I think like for me it started, it started out really young. I mean, it was like, man, maybe like when I was like 5, I would say 5 or 6, weird shit started happening.
Well, let's go through that. And has it happened throughout life, or was it just more when you were a kid?
It has. It's happened. Multiple different things. Like when I was a kid, the first thing really that I noticed was, and again, like I haven't talked about this shit, so it's one of those things where it's just like it sounds so ridiculous when it comes out of my mouth, to me. But honestly, so when I was a kid, and my parents would put me to bed, usually at about, I would say it was probably about 10:30 at night, my bed would start shaking. And the first time it happened, I honestly thought it was my heartbeat that was shaking the bed.
Was it in the same rhythm?
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
it
yeah. It was like just it would. I mean, if I get it was like it would shake like this.
okay?
It
So it
would just
wasn't like
shake.
the ones people paid 50 cents for like the buzz,
No, it
like,
wasn't like a
was it
vibrating thing. It was like this. It was like this kind of shaking, and it
shimmy?
wasn't like a violent shake. It would just like shake really bad.
Yeah,
Um, and
like
and and it
side
would
to side.
progressively get worse. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So I thought like when it started, like I was kind of like, is it me? Like, am I shaking my foot? It almost felt, it felt like somebody was shaking the bed. And
Mm,
I remember telling my parents like, hey, like I went to sleep and my bed was shaking, and they were like, oh, you were dreaming.
yeah, yeah. They didn't hear it then. It didn't make like it wasn't like loud or anything?
It I mean, for me, it was loud. My bedroom was kind of in the back of the house, like in the television is kind of like in front of it was kind of in the front room of our house.
Okay.
So there was like a small hallway that went into the bedroom, and they would my door would be closed. So even you probably wouldn't be able to hear, because I remember being like, I would like maybe call for my parents and they wouldn't hear me right away.
Yeah.
So I feel like even if it did make sound, um, and this went on for a good amount of, I would say probably like it wasn't like every night, but it would be like a good amount of the week
Yeah.
nights, and then it would happen like, man, I would say it probably happened for a whole year of like,
How long would it go on for?
dude, it
I
would go it would go on until I sat up.
hmm,
And then and sometimes if I sat up and then laid back down, it would start doing it again.
hmm.
And it's weird because I always think like, you watch like Poltergeist, like, and there's like weird shit that's happening to kids. And I guess it wasn't maybe until I saw that movie that I was just kind of like, whoa, this is kind of this is
Yeah.
a weird thing that's happening. Um,
Did you get a
and
sense that it was something, like, messing with you, or did you feel
de-
like that it was
de-
more it was like you, like, something vibrating out of you?
no, 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 it was definitely an outside influence.
Mm,
Because I couldn't stop it. I would look at myself to make sure that it was not me. And I would
yeah,
also like get in this weird, like, I would get so scared that I would be like I wouldn't say petrified, but like I would think to myself like, put your hands next to your legs, and kind of lay like as one unit, and maybe
mm,
they'll stop. And like, so I was old enough to kind of be able to think like, hey, like maybe I could stop this from happening. But it was definitely like an outside, it seemed like an outside influence that was either maybe trying to communicate with me, or maybe trying to like, like, I mean, that's kind of the only thing that I could think,
yeah,
really. It wasn't like it was a, I don't feel like it was like a ghost, like, necessarily like people say like entities maybe, but it was definitely something I was, or maybe I was just in tune with something that, was happening all the time, and I just kind of like tuned into that. But
yeah,
it was physical. It was physical enough where
yeah, that's wild.
if I sat up, and at first I thought it was just like either me dreaming or I was just kind of making this shit up.
Mm,
But it happened way too often for it to for it to happen. And I remember like being like giving my parents a hard time and being like, I don't want to sleep on my bed. And they'd be like, why? I'd be like, because my bed shakes at night. I can't stop it from shaking. And they'd just be like, you're ridiculous. Like,
yeah. So, what like, with so this would be like, you said it would go on at start around 10:30. Was what time did you go to bed? So it'd be like, would you already be asleep?
I would already be asleep, and then I
Okay.
would wake up. I would probably, I mean, my parents, um, the thing, so my dad worked two jobs. So my dad was like he was always a body and paint guy, and a fabricator, but like his like real job, I guess, was like he was a spring maker. He's a coiler, so he made springs. So he would come home at 5 o'clock in the after work, and he would come home and eat, and then he would go work at my cousin's body shop. And so he would come home late at night, and I remember like I would go to bed, and then he would wake me up, and then we would watch like Johnny Carson or some shit,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah,
And then he would put me back to sleep. Um, so it was like it would be kind of in between, though, those times where I would get back up. And a lot of times, like I remember getting up and walking out of my room and just sitting on the couch, with him and watching TV, because I was like kind of petrified to, like, well, one, I couldn't really sleep, and then two, I was like petrified of it.
sure, yeah,
Like when you're a 6-year-old kid and your bed shakes, you're just like, man, this is fucked up.
yeah. Multiple times a week, right? Like on a weekly basis. Yeah,
Yeah, and again, like I thought, I mean, I thought I essentially I originally thought it was me, but it happened too often for it not to be, and you start thinking logically, I think, when you're older, to be like, why would I like make some shit, like, why, being 6 years old, why would I make up this story that my bed shook?
yeah, yeah,
Like, it wasn't like I was like abused or somewhere like that, where it's like there's this outlet where a kid needs to, like, you know have this outlet, or, I was just using abused as kind of a thing, because, kids when they're abused at young ages, like, end up doing weird shit,
yeah, yeah,
or like crying out or acting out, in different ways, just to kind of get attention or whatever, the help that they need. So it wasn't like that, and it's just kind of like, why in the world would I ever why would I make this shit up?
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I didn't
it
live.
was it was just like my bed shakes. It wasn't like you're saying there's a monster in the closet or something's tormented me. It was like, "That motherfucker shaking my bed." Like,
Yeah, yeah, and like, we lived in a fairly new house. It wasn't like I lived in a super old house. Like,
yeah,
my parents' house was like built during the war. Like, there was only one other family that lived there, so it wasn't like there was like this, like,
yeah,
backstory of like, oh, dude, there was a child that died in this house or something like that, or
yeah,
anything like that. It was just kind of like, and again, I think, why in the world would I make some shit up like that? I wasn't like, I wasn't a kid that like lied or needed attention or anything like that. And I never really told anybody except my parents.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, you
now I'm telling, like, all your
worlds.
viewers.
But you know what's weird is that a lot of paranormal researchers now are saying, to the point where you're saying where the house was fairly new, is that a lot of times they think things are attached to the land, not to the actual
Oh,
physical
yeah, yeah,
space.
yeah.
So it could be both, but sometimes they feel things are like attached to the land
Yeah,
itself.
I mean, that would make perfect sense. That'd
Yeah.
make perfect sense. I mean, the house that I live in now, there's there was Native Americans that lived here like 1,200 years ago. Like, Peabody Museum had did like a excavation in like 1941. As a matter of fact, there's this big rock that has the top of it broken off from a glacier,
Mm.
and literally they lived in that with a structure over the top of it, and it's like maybe 200 yards from my house.
Yeah, yeah.
Not, I mean, not getting off subject. So yeah, I could see how, like, maybe, like, spiritual things are attached to, like, I don't have any like weird stuff that happens here, knock on wood, yet, but yeah, I could see how that would be, if if there's ancestors for hundreds or thousands of years that have been on that. It doesn't necessarily mean, and that's kind of like where that frequency thing comes in, where it's like, yeah, they're probably just there as in a different frequency all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's all stuff that's very interesting to ponder, and I think some of the fun of it, or the things that make it fun, is that we don't know, right? And it could be all these things that it's that looking into it is and trying to think of what it could be sometimes is more fun, than knowing
Yeah,
the
yeah.
answer. I think.
It's like
Mystery of mysteries.
around the same time of like that was happening. Um, Around the same time, I would probably say between I was no, I would say maybe I was maybe around 8 years old or so. Um, I used to be able to do this weird thing and take like watches and make watches run that didn't run.
Mm.
So my great grandfather worked on the railroad back in the day, and he had this watch, like this pocket watch that my parents had in like a curio cabinet for like ever, and it was like on this little pedestal. And one day I took it out of, it hadn't run in years, like I'm talking like he got it when he retired, so that was like my great grandfather, so that was probably, when I was a kid it was probably already 50 years old, maybe 60 years
Yeah.
old. And dude, I used to take it and hold it in my hand, like inside my hands like this,
Yeah.
dude, and I would be able to make the watch run for like 15 minutes. And it completely freaked my parents out. Like completely. I remember doing it and being, and this sounds ridiculous again, dude, but I remember like holding it and just like chanting to myself like work, make this watch work, watch work, and I literally would be able to take pocket watches or whatever. I don't know if it was because like the heat of my hands or whatever the case may be, but like it was this weird thing that my parents would always be like they never told anybody, but they would always be like, oh, like that's this weird thing that you could do, and nobody should know that you could actually do this thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's the
regard
vibrations, man. The vibrations.
I mean, maybe, but that was around,
Because-
around the same time. And then, I think as I got older, um, was like it. I think a lot. I think it kind of changed directions as far as like the stuff that I was like susceptible to, I guess, or like like kind of the stuff that had I I was experiencing.
Yeah. I don't want, before we move on, I want to get, I got a couple questions about the watch stuff. So with your great grandfather's watch, you could get it to work for like 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
said.
yeah.
Then it would gradually go back to
Yeah, it would stop working.
that. Did you ever try it with other
Yeah,
watches?
yeah, yeah. I could do it with pocket watches. I could do it any watch. Like if somebody had a watch that didn't run, I like you could hand me a watch, dude, and I would be able to like make it run for a short period of time. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Did you like, as a kid when you were doing that, was it something you felt, or was it just like you just put it in your hand and you willed it? Like
I mean, it's kind of weird because I think I've always kind of felt like this like it almost felt like kind of like energy to some degree.
yeah.
Like where you kind of harness like a energy. And still to this day I can't do it with watches anymore, but I still to this day like I almost kind of feel, the same, where it's like sometimes I could feel this, this energy. I don't want to fast forward now, but I think like you were
Well,
saying.
bro, honestly, it's like literally the best skill you could have as a dude that's into vintage choppers. Like it's like
I know.
you
I
can just
wish I
be
could
like,
just.
bro,
I wish I could
fucking
just
work.
hold. I just wish I could hold on to like a cylinder and then
Yeah,
kickstart a
yeah,
bike and
yeah,
just be like,
yeah.
"Oh, it works! It works!"
Hold on to this carburetor and let it just do whatever.
But it was unexplainable, and like I said, it freaked my parents out so bad. They were like, "Do not tell anybody that you could do this." And like when we grew up, I mean, we
Did
grew
you
up
use
in.
that as ammo to be like, yeah, and you didn't believe me on the bed shake? Like, look at what I'm doing with
I don't
this.
know if I don't know if I did or not,
Yeah.
but I do remember it being 100% being real. Like
So
people
yeah,
discredit it and say whatever, but I know, and again,
so it would be the weirdest thing to make up, right? Like if you're
yeah,
gonna
like
make up,
what yeah, like I'm a superhero. I can make watches work.
it's
Like
weird.
it doesn't make any it doesn't make any sense. It's like just some stupid thing, and really, I I got it from. I watched I think it was a magician on television do it, if I
Hmm,
remember correctly.
okay.
and that's why, and that's how it kind of became a thing, because I watched it on television, and then I remember asking my parents if I could take that watch out and see if I could do it with that watch. And I knew that watch hadn't run in forever, and you could wind the shit out of it, and
It
it didn't work. And
mm,
and again, when I did it, it literally like my parents were like, put the watch back, like just leave it alone, don't touch the watch. But then I did it, and I couldn't do it with digital watches. I can only do it with mechanical watches, you know.
yeah.
I never really could explain it. I always thought it was just like, I was like, oh, it's got to be like the warmth of my hands being together or something, you know.
Mm,
But I still feel like you were saying with the monks, you know. I think like it's like mind over matter, where you could literally take and make yourself warm if you meditate on it, or tell yourself, you know, like you can get warm, you know,
yeah.
because you see these dudes that like do like these like ice baths and shit. And there's one dude from like, I don't remember what that dude's name is, but I wish I knew, but he was, they did a bunch of studies on him, and he was able to like sit in ice cold water and bring his body temperature up, like slow his heart rate down, bring his body temperature up. And oddly enough, and he taught himself how to do it, and oddly enough, researchers were stoked because he had a twin brother that couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
you know, so they did studies on the both of them, and were like, this dude, obviously it's not genetic that he could do it, because his brother can't, and he's a twin, you know. So I think like a lot of things we discredit, but when you're a kid, you don't know any better that you can't do some shit.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask you too, like how, like what made you try and fix a watch, right, or make a watch work? But like,
Yeah, I mean,
you saw it on TV and you're like, I can do that. Like, try it, or
and
you just
yeah,
open to it. Yeah,
and that was essentially it. You know, I remember watching the show, and this dude starting a watch. So I mean, whether it was real or not, I didn't know whether it was real. And I think, you know, like being a kid, you don't have boundaries. You don't know what is real and what's not. Like you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. You
yeah,
know, and even I think like older, you know, you hear all these stories about people doing these like superhuman things, depending on what, you
yeah.
know,
Like the
you know,
kid that gets stuck under a car or something, and the mother lifts the car up and all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah, like that shit where it's like mind over matter. You at that moment in time, you're not thinking like shit, you know, like what am I gonna do? You either do something or you don't,
Yeah, yeah, just in action. Yeah,
you
and then
know?
I think Stan Lee had a TV show too about people that could do things.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. And it made sense because Stanley was like, you know, it was a play on superheroes, but people that had like weird abilities like that, you know, that they could do things that were beyond the normal.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And you know, I mean, what do they say? They say, you know, whatever percentage you use of your brain, dude, you know, like every organ that we have in our body is used to the, you know, to the fullest. I mean, you know, you don't use 10% of your heart. You know, your heart
yeah,
is like, you know, so we have these brains that we use only a small percentage of our brains. What, you know, what are we capable of doing that, you know, we don't know. And you know, again, like I said, when you're a kid, you don't, you there's a fine line between reality and you know, what you believe,
sure.
you know.
And
I
there's
mean,
also, and when you get on the brain stuff too, there's also just like different people can access or fire different parts of the brain more easily than others, and that's where a lot of weird stuff comes from too. Like, because
right, right.
you know, some people have blockages or like can't fight, like, you know, even on like weird stuff, like with like serial killers or something, they say something's like more active in one area than another and can
Yeah, yeah,
cause
yeah, yeah, like
brain
that.
chemistry is still a huge field of like where they don't know anything. Like they only know a drop in the bucket of to really what's out there to figuring out like how everything really works.
Yeah, and how do you know, it's like there's parts of our brain that we don't act, we don't even act, you don't have access to, or you don't
Yeah.
use, and it's even like when they say, oh, like left-handed people are like more creative, or like, because they think differently, or
Right brain, left-handed.
what's that?
They say, if you're left-handed, you're right brained. Like, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right, right. So,
Yeah.
I think, a lot of things are not explained just because, you know, maybe we don't have access to the information, how to utilize it. It might be like when you hear monks, or like, uh, these various like religious people, where they're like saying like, oh, meditation unlocks all this different stuff that's in your brain, and all these functions that you don't normally use. There's obviously something, there's something to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else? The shaking bed, the fixing watches. So
so so then, like, you know of course, like, little weird shit, but the kind of the next big thing growing up was when I was 15. I had an out of body experience, which was the fucking gnarliest thing that ever happened. One of the gnarliest things that ever happened to me. And the scariest shit that ever happened to me. And again, I didn't really believe in a lot of this stuff. Like, I'm like the glass half empty dude.
yeah.
I've always been like, prove it to me, like, it's one of those things where I won't call bullshit on it, but I want to be proven wrong to some degree on stuff.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
And I think going into a lot of stuff, that's kind of the way you have to be, is to be like, oh well, like, I don't know, is it real or is it not? Um, so yeah, when I was about 15.
But that's important because I feel like I'm kind of the same way. I don't discount anything. Like, I'm like open to anything, but I also go into it like half, like not doubting it, but like you got to have a healthy amount of skepticism, I think, right?
Of
Like,
course you do.
yeah,
Like,
so
I mean, human. I think human beings want tangible. Our goal is always to have tangible,
a
proof
measurable,
of
yeah, yeah,
physical, tangible proof of something. And I
yeah,
think it's just the way we are. It's
yeah.
like, yeah, there's a lot of shit that happens, but tell me why it happens. And that's one of the going back to that whole thing where it's like, like, we're all God's things, like, that thing is kind of the same thing. It's like, your dog probably doesn't question everything. I mean, you're not in the psyche of a dog, but a dog doesn't probably question, why, why do I like treats? You know, why do I like to go for walks? I mean, we can't know for sure, but for the most part, I think people always want to have proof of something,
Mm.
and that's why I say, like, even being on the podcast, it's like, I can't prove that this shit is real to anybody else, but to me, these are the experiences that I had, and to me, they were real experiences.
Yeah.
Do I say that? Do I say that it was real? I mean, I can't say it's real. I can't discredit it either. I know, I mean, I only know what I know. So,
Yeah, yeah. And
you
yeah, you
know.
only know your experience, right? Like, like what you've experienced. So go ahead. You were 15. What happened?
So when I was
Out
15,
of body experience.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, which is really weird, dude, because this is like regardless of it, whether it's like unconscious or conscious, it's not dreaming.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's probably other people out there that have out of body experience. It's not dreaming. It's not a lucid dream. It's not anything like that. It is the weirdest uncomfortable feeling that I've ever had, like one of the most uncomfortable feelings I've ever had in my life,
Mm.
and scary as shit. So when I was a kid, when I was like 15, of course, you know, I was like into hardcore and punk and all this shit, So of course, we're going back to like the 80s now. My bed was in one corner of my room, and next to my bed, I had like house speakers. So I had my stereo, which was my turntable, my cassettes underneath, and then of course, like it was like one of those tall ones where you have like your albums go on the bottom of it, and then you
Sure.
have your tape deck and your tuner, and then your record player on the top, or your turntable on the top, and I had two speakers next to it. So my bed was lower than my speakers. Okay, this is I'm explaining you to this because you'll understand where I'm going with it. So my speakers, I would say, were probably maybe like 1.5 to 2 feet higher than where my head was on my bed. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sleeping, and my alarm clock was on top of my speaker so that I could hit it when I was, like when I snoozed it and shit before school. So it was somewhere after 4 o'clock in the morning. I want to say it was like maybe 4:13, 4:10, something like that. And I remember not really waking up, but I remember like being like conscious but not. And when I looked over, because I kind of like freaked out because I was like, whoa, what's going on? And when I looked over, my clock on my speaker was at eye level, right? So now, like, which is 2 feet higher than my bed.
Sure.
So I'm going like, dude, what in the world is going on? This is weird. Like, am I sitting up? Like, and again, it was not a dream. It was because when it's happening, it's like there's multiple things that are happening, like physically, that you're feeling that wouldn't necessarily be a dream. So whether it's an altered state or whatever, out of body experience is, it's not like a dream, because we've all had like dreams or lucid dreams when something's happening, or like, but this was not it. This was like other level shit, like different consciousness kind of thing. So as I'm looking at my clock, I'm watching it kind of like get lower and lower and lower until it's about like, I would say maybe like 3 feet under where I am. And then I went from looking at that, I went to looking straight down, and I saw me lying in bed, the back of my, like from my waist up, basically at that point, me laying like this, with like my arms underneath my pillow with my face down. My head was like tilted to the side. And I remember being like, what the fuck? This is weird. And as this is happening, I'm like floating and floating and floating until I got towards high enough where I could see my whole bedroom in depth. Like I could see like my hardcore posters that were hanging on the, because now I'm like freaking out trying to figure out what's going on. Like, at this point I'm like, dude, what is going, like, this is weird. Like, this is a weird dream. Like, I don't feel like I'm dreaming. I'm conscious of what's going on.
Yeah.
And everything was like in depth. Like when you dream sometimes, like you might be in your house, but everything's not exactly the same, or you might be in a room where it looks the same, but like details of it are not specific.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this room, like everything in the room is like, it is specific. Like I am like
in your room.
Like I'm like on a ladder, sitting on a ladder, looking at my room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So me being like kind of the way I am, I wanted to make sure, like, I'm looking around now. I'm pretty scared, dude. But I'm looking around to make sure that I see stuff that is like that is uh, in my room, you know, and my room's basically laid out. And at that point is when I freaked out, and then I was trying to wake. Like, I remember trying to wake myself up and not being able to be like, now I'm, I wouldn't say I was as high as the ceiling, but I'm starting to like float, and float and float and float, and
Yeah.
now I'm getting like freaked out because I can't wake up. And then I was like, man, I have to like do something about this. This is Something's fucked up. Like, and my first thought was like that I wouldn't be able to get back. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna float out of here, and then they're gonna find me dead in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that was my first, because like you watched it at 15. You've watched enough shit, dude, and horror movies and all this weird shit to to basically be like, uh, I'm dying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, something's fucked up. Like, I'm not gonna be able to get back into my body. And then as soon, like, I just kind of felt myself like willing back into it. Like willing myself to be like, dude, I have to do this. I have to do this. And when that happened, I snapped back, dude, and I woke up like I woke up and I sat up, like straight up. I sometimes like you stop breathe, or like, like when you sleep and you can't like wake yourself back up and you freak out, like, sometimes you're like like you do one of those things. This wasn't that, dude. I woke up like, and I just sat up, and I just remember being like, holy shit, dude, like what just happened to me. And I didn't go back to sleep. And I remember the next day I went to school, and I remember telling like the dudes that I hung out with that skated, like, this shit happened. And they were like, whoa, dude, that's kind of crazy. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't a dream, and so that was kind of that experience. It was really traumatizing, like, for me. It was really like, I remember being like, dude, I don't want to go back to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. It was only that one time ever.
No, it happened multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's happened multiple times. Like,
Did you
I
did
don't.
you get used to it, or did you embrace it, or did you just like every time freak out and be like,
No,
look back in there?
it to me, it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I think like the difference between what was happening and that was, the difference is you're consciously thinking.
Mm.
In dreams, I feel like you don't consciously think. Like, you see stuff that's happening, but you're not necessarily consciously thinking about the stuff that's happening. You're basically, it's happening, and you're just kind of along for the ride. Like when you dream, like, you could think in a dream, and kind of sometimes you could alter dreams, I feel. And this might be me. I don't know if this happens to you
Yeah.
or any other human being, but this is not on the same level. This is not necessarily being like kind of along for the ride. You're consciously aware of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was kind of the scary thing, because I think at some point you're thinking like that you're not going to be able, if this is happening and it's real, this is not going to be able to happen.
Did and how many, like, so did it feel like when people talk about like, did you ever research like astral projection and stuff, or did it feel like something different?
I definitely I have done like some research. Like not a ton.
Yeah, yeah.
But this coming out is very. When I say coming out, I mean like at first it's very it seems very subtle, like kind of like a very soft. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like it's not like it's not like like in movies when they like do that weird thing where it's just like it's like and it's like something just is like appears. You know what I mean? It's not like that. It's like this weird separation that happens, or to me, this separation that happened really slowly.
mm,
Where you're kind of aware of what's going on, where I'm like I said, I was looking at the clock being like, why is this clock next to me? I know this thing is above my head. And then as it's like kind of like slowly going away from me, you're like, wait, this is really weird. And as that's happening, you're kind of feeling, to me, how I felt was kind of like that feeling when you drop on a roller coaster, that
yeah.
first like initial like drop. That was kind of like what it, if I, at that point, I remember it kind of feeling like, and it didn't happen fast, but it was kind of like that same feeling, where
Mm,
there's this weird inertia kind of happening that like it didn't really make much sense in my brain,
mm,
but it happened slow.
yeah.
I would say it probably, and I remember the really weird thing is that now I was looking at a clock, right? So now the clock that's next to my bed is a digital clock. So as I'm watching this clock because it's next to me, when I woke up, it was 4 minutes later than when I saw the clock that when it was happening.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and people will probably be like, "That's fucking bullshit," but really, it was like, and as I'm like, as this is happening, whether it took 4 minutes or not, it's like, if it was a dream, dude, how would I know it's 4:10 or whatever? I'm pretty sure it was about 4:10, and then when I woke up, it was like 4:14 or something. So it's like, how could I consciously know if it was a dream what time it was, and then when I woke back up, it's 4 minutes later than when I was dreaming?
Mm,
I mean, that's an awful, crazy coincidence if that was necessarily the truth.
yeah, yeah.
You know, so that was so to some degree that was kind of like me making sense of it in
Yeah.
some weird way where I was like, dude, how would I, like people would say, well, how do you know it happened? I'm like, well, I was kind of like looking at a clock the whole time that it was happening, and I knew that I wasn't gone for long. Like it didn't happen for a long period of time. The longer part of the whole thing was me trying to figure out how to wake up out of this or to get back to not being floating on the ceiling type shit.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were gonna go through the ceiling or like
Yeah,
did
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah, for 100%.
yeah, that's wild. Um, did the clock change while you were looking at it? Like did
The clock did.
yeah,
So as this is happening, like I have like a gauge. It just so happened. I mean, I feel like I had a gauge to be like what's going on. Like I've seen, again, I wasn't focused on the clock. I'm focusing on all this stuff. I know where there's posters in my room. I know where there's a Sick of It All poster hanging in my room. I know
yeah,
where there's, I know where there's, Gorilla Biscuits Start Today was next to my bed. I had a giant Start Today poster that was next to my bed. I know where it is. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
supposed to be 5 feet underneath me.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the
that's wild.
but again, the clock was kind of like this weird thing where I was like, well, that was weird. And I remember telling my buddies, like, dude, I was like woke up and it was like almost the same time as when I was looking, like left or was looking at my clock. So yeah.
Mm, wild. Just an aside, Judge is playing Providence next Friday. Not so
Really?
Next Friday, yeah. If you, as we're talking about Sick of It All Gorilla Biscuit stuff, like, you know, if you're around, come on out. I know it's a little bit of a haul for you.
It is, but yeah.
So the other times, like did it feel pretty much the same, or did it differ, or did you get more used to it at all, or like every time it was just like fuck this?
So,
And was it in the same time frame, or was it?
no, I didn't have it for a long time, and it was, you know, and I thought at first it was like, dude, was it, you know, was it turmoil that was happening in my life, and this kind of, you know, these, you know, it manifested in whatever way it was, but it always seemed to be random, dude, and it didn't happen again for a good amount of time. Um, but it happened multiple times and it felt the same, and it didn't happen a lot of times.
Yeah.
Um, there was one time, there was two times act well, one of the times was different, but one time I lived in my apartment, and I lived um excuse me, up on a hill, and over on the other side of the hill was a like a park. That time, that time I was it like that time I floated to the swing set at the park,
All right, so
and
you
then
were ways away. Yeah.
back, and then yeah, and it was like it wasn't controllable, but I think at that point, that might have been the second time. I think at that point I was like, let me kind of see where this go, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't like, I knew it had happened before, so I didn't completely freak out.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, let me, you know, I was conscious enough to be like, hey, let me see like if I can kind of like do this shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
know,
So,
to
yeah.
some degree.
Yeah.
This all sounds so fucking ridiculous, dude.
No,
But
no.
um
I've heard of stuff like this before. I've never experienced it, but I've heard of stuff like it.
so it was scary, but I kind of was like, you know what, I was a little bit more intrigued by it, and I knew from the previous time I wasn't as scared. So
Yeah.
again, whatever was happening, whether I was really consciously leaving my body or I was on a different plane or a different frequency, and that was allowing me to do this. That was kind of you know, at that point I was like, hey, you know, like let me kind of experience this without being like 100% scared.
Yeah.
That was a little bit more, obviously a little bit more time, and I didn't have anything really to gauge it by.
Yeah.
But then I was able to, I was able to like to get myself back, and that wasn't like that was that was weird where I was somewhere else, but then it's not like I floated back.
Yeah.
You know, I was able to like wake myself up. And again, what I feel like when you're dreaming, it's not this, it's not really, it wasn't the same. Like it wasn't the same feeling, you know.
Yeah.
And again, whether I was in a altered state of consciousness, maybe where it was allowing me to kind of do other stuff and feel other things, it wasn't a dream.
Did it feel more like you were there, like your conscious was there present, like you were like floating there, like kind of like when I say like astral trajectory, or did it feel like you were remote viewing?
No, it felt like I was there. Like
Yeah.
it felt like things are happening. Like I didn't necessarily like feel like you know, like wind or breeze or anything like that, but I could see stuff happening. Like you could, you know, like I could see trees like moving, and like it was like things are happening, but your physical perception of stuff is was taken out of the equation. You know,
Yeah.
like where if you walk outside and it's windy out, you could feel the breeze.
You feel
Like
how the temperature, stuff like that.
I was watching. It's almost like you're there physically, but you're not feeling you're not physically feeling things,
Sure.
you know, and that's kind of the experience that I had.
Any of the times that you kind of had out of body experiences, did you ever see anything that wasn't there in like regular
So
existence? Like,
so
did you ever
the
see like other things that were like on that same frequency that you wouldn't see in regular life, if you know what I mean?
not that I the last time that this happened, the last time um that this happened was probably the scariest and the last time it happened. So this time this was really strange. This is probably 15 years ago, I want to say 16 years ago. Um I was at I was at a different apartment, which was down the street from my other apartment. This time, this is fucking crazy. This time, when I left, I left out of the out of the side of the wall,
Mm,
but the wall was like a had this like glowing blue light that was there, like a like a like a big blue kind of bright light, and I left out of that light. And for a short period of time, I remember seeing like the the backyard, my cars, and then it I it was nothing. Like I was not like in my bed. I was not feeling anything. I was not anywhere like I used to be. And then a short period of time after, I was back at the in the back of my yard, and that blue light was on the outside of my house. And then I remember like floating through the blue light, and then that's when that process of like kind of like me sitting up, because I would get like, you know, I would get kind of freaked out. And I remember um like waking up and being like super calm, but like freaked out, like physically. It wasn't like I woke up and like my heart was racing, or you know, like sometimes when you have bad dreams or something, like you'll wake up and like, you know, your heart's racing or you're sweating or something like that. It was like, dude, I was like perfectly like calm.
mm.
So that was the last time that happened, and I can't explain really what that like light was, but that freaked me out. And then and again, like I wasn't in control at all of like what kind of was happening at that point.
So you didn't feel like you were actually navigating, it was just you were just going somewhere.
That was the last, yeah. And that was like not that that felt like not me. It felt like I was almost being pulled out,
Mm,
kind of, at that point. And that was the last time it happened. That was probably like, I would say probably 16 years ago.
wow.
And that was fun. And that really freaked me out, because I feel like the other times I was in semi control of like what was going on. I was kind of conscious. This time it was, I was not conscious of what was going on. It was just, it was like it was like I floated out, and then it was black. Like again, and being that that stuff has happened, you know, you kind of, you don't get you you're never used to it, but like you could see stuff where you're like, okay, like I know where I'm at. This was not like that. This was, so where I was, I have no idea. I was not present, and then I was back.
Mm,
And then again, this like blue light opened up, and then I like floated into to back into the room. And I was, at that point I could see what was going on. Like even when I like floated through the wall, which was really weird, I was
yeah.
able to you know, um, and the previous time before that, it was kind of the same. There was no blue light or anything, but the previous time like that, I was able to see like, you know, like leave kind of the premises of where I was, and I could
Yeah.
see my house. And I remember floating like that. The second time, when I was telling you, I remember being like really high up, and I don't really like heights. so I was like, what, kind of like, what is going on? It's really weird. But the last time was, that was really freaked me out. I didn't sleep for like a couple days. I didn't get much sleep because I was afraid that shit was gonna happen again. And again, it wasn't like a thing where I was, like I would I always felt like I didn't tell myself like, dude, I'm gonna do this shit tonight. Like I wasn't in control of it. It was just kind of,
Yeah.
I feel like it kind of just happened.
Do you feel, was that blue light? Did that feel like going through like a portal or something?
Dude, I don't know, but it felt, it was the strangest fucking thing. It almost felt like, if I remember correctly, it almost felt like electricity. Like, have you ever
Hmm.
got shocked before by like, you ever get shocked by like 120, like your house plug or something?
Yeah.
It
I
felt
was
like,
the kid that had to test the theory,
yeah, yeah,
put, it
of sticking like a fork in the, yeah.
wasn't a fork, but it was like my Swiss Army knife or something. I was like,
Oh
what?
yeah, 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 like sticking it in there. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it felt kind of the same way. Like this, it was like this, like kind of like electric shock kind of feeling. And I
yeah.
remember in that time, I was not able to. I was kind of like not able to navigate. I guess if you want to call it navigate or whatever, but I
Yeah,
wasn't able to do anything. I was like, I remember just being like kind of like limp, like floating
yeah, yeah.
almost. So I don't know. I mean, I can't say that, I don't know what it was, so I don't know, but I do remember this, and I remember the light just being this like super bright blue neon light that was just like, and it lit up my whole room
It's wild, man.
because like at the time I was with like at the time I was with my ex-girlfriend, so I was able to see her, and it just lit up the whole room. Like and again, like, you know, when every time that it happened, I was able to see stuff that in a dream you normally wouldn't be able to see. But yeah, it was like this weird electrical kind of charge almost, like when I went through it. And that sound, again, all this stuff kind of sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
And
But then when you went through it, it was just like blackness, or you were just somewhere where you didn't know where
I
you
was
were.
in my so when I first went through, I was in my backyard.
Yeah,
So I was able to see the parking lot that was like behind my apartment
yep.
with all the car, there's like 4 or 5 cars that were parked back there with my neighbors. I was able to see those cars. Um, and then it was just like black. It was like blacked out kind of
Mm.
thing. And then when I was back, I was still floating limp, but I was like floating through through um through this like light back in, and as soon as I got back in, like again, the room was blue, and that was kind of the same thing where you just kind of like, it always seemed like when you when I left, it was like this very easy feeling of, you know what I mean? Like just this separation where you're just like, kind of like floating in water almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of sense where you're just like, but then like getting back, it was always like this, like a, like a, uh, kind of like a charge of, I want to say energy, but it was like this, like it's like kind of like this, you're like, and you're like back in, you're like, whoa, dude, like what happened? And I would always sit up on the side of the bed and just sit there and be like, dude, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, yeah.
It was very unexplained, and never was it a transition to waking up. It was like waking up, and it was like I was like, it was like immediate, like when you wake up and you're like groggy from waking up,
Yeah.
even sometimes if you have a bad dream and you wake up, you're like kind of like out of it. There was no sense of being like out of it. It was essentially like, whoa, almost like breathing like straight oxygen, or something like that.
It's wild, man. Yeah, that's wild, dude. Like I'm jealous that I haven't had that, but I'm also glad that I haven't had that. You know what I mean?
Dude, and the other thing too is that it it always kind of seemed to take a lot out of me when I woke up. Like I wasn't like exhausted, but I just like maybe mentally,
Mm,
you know, they say like you use a lot of energy. Like your brain uses like I think they say in a day your brain uses 20% of the energy in your body. No other part of your body uses that much energy
yeah,
in a day. So you know, regardless of maybe whatever was happening to me was in my mind, and that's kind of why I would be like I wouldn't be tired, but I would just be like drained.
sure.
You know, like
Did that last all day? Did that last through the day? That drained?
it usually lasted most of the day where I was just like drained from it, you know, like and it was this and it was a weird thing where it was always like I feel like uh it always just kind of was like um just this weird feeling that was like I didn't normally have this weird, you know, this weird feeling kind of, you know. Um and again, I mean, I can't necessarily say, you know, what it was. I know the last time that happened was probably the scariest time that happened because
Yeah.
again, regardless of what happened, whether it was I was abducted by something or you know, I was on a different frequency where I was not in control of what happened, and that was the last time it happened. So that was kind of the major thing that happened throughout, you know, throughout um, my life. It wasn't like a constant thing that happened, but it was
Yeah.
a constant. It was a constant, meaning like it didn't happen all the time, but it was this constant thing that happened multiple times.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
How long in between? Like, was it like years in between?
it was usually years in between.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, it happened when I was 15. I would say 15, 16, somewhere right around there. And then it happened, I would say, when I was probably about somewhere around 25. And then the last time was, you know, probably like 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. So it didn't happen often,
Yeah.
but it was always the same thing, and it was uncontrollable,
Mm,
you know, which is another thing that kind of like, you know, like in theory makes sense because it's like if something happens once, it's like an anomaly. It's just like it happened. Like did it you know, it's like what happened? Well, I don't know. But then when it happens again and you're not in control of it, then you're like, wait a minute, this happened
mm.
again. And then when it happens, you know, another time, you're just like, man, you know,
Alright.
like, and it's always the same feeling, the same things that's kind of happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I ain't trying to scare you, but you're about due for another one, buddy.
dude, I hope
I'm just fucking.
I hope not. I mean, you know, again, it's kind of a neat thing,
Yeah, sure.
and but it's just really it's really scary, you know. I mean,
Especially like the last one you said where you weren't really in control of it as much as some of the other times.
yeah, I wasn't in control of it at all, and I've never had, you know, like the other times, it's been this like smooth kind of transition, I guess. You know, this time it was like this really abrupt, weird thing with like, and again, I've never seen like lights or any, you know, anything like that,
Yeah.
you know. So I mean, again, it sounds completely uh, made up, but it whatever happened to me um definitely consciously happened to me.
Yeah.
Whether anybody else could see it, probably not. And that's why I was saying, you know, like these weird frequencies where it's, you know, you might just be on a different frequency and that, you know, and that's what happened. So
Your dog in the room or something?
yeah, my dog. She's sorry about that. She's like coughing. She's like an old girl. Um,
That's a
yeah, so you know, and I mean, and I've had some. some other experiences, you know, like with like entities and some stuff like that. So I think, you know, I think to some degree, I mean, we can get into that. You know, that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
You know, to some degree, I think people are just, you know that like they say, like people that get struck by lightning, most people that get struck have gotten struck by lightning, like will get struck by lightning multiple times.
Yeah.
They don't know why, but they're just like a lightning rod. There's something energy in them that attracts lightning. You know, like if you got struck by lightning once, you're probably prone to getting struck by lightning again. And to some degree, I think like supernatural stuff or you know, this stuff is probably about the same. It's probably like you know, you operate at a different kind of in a different realm to some degree than the average person maybe does, or you're utilizing a part of your brain that somebody else isn't utilizing, you know.
Yeah.
So I think when stuff like that happens, uh you know, you're more like a beacon, I guess, kind of for it,
Sure. Yeah.
you know. Like, you know, when I was a kid, we used to go to my grandparents' house, and I would always hear in the attic this is probably around 8, 9 years old. I would always hear somebody call my name. Like there was rooms upstairs in my grandparents' house, but there was like a TV in the living room and the shelf that blocked it. Oddly enough, that shelf is now in my shop because my grandmother made it. But it was like this heavy shelf with a television, and I would always hear somebody call my name upstairs, and I would never go upstairs because we weren't really allowed to go upstairs, and nobody was upstairs. Occasionally would go,
When you
but
say upstairs, is it attic or a second floor of the house?
it was a second floor of the house. It was partially an attic, and then there was a bedroom upstairs.
Okay.
And a lot of the times when we went over there, and I wasn't the only one that heard it, because I would hang out with my cousin Zach, who's like also motorcycle dude. His dad was like getting back to the motorcycle thing. His dad was a custom bike builder and painter, and painted most of the club guys' stuff. I think in the last podcast I briefly touched on that, but he heard it. He's heard it he heard it as well, because we were there, and I was like, dude, did you just hear that? And he was like, yeah. It was like somebody said your name, and I was like, yeah, dude.
So that's wild. It didn't say his name. It said he heard it say your name.
Yeah. He heard it say my name. So yeah. So it was, you know, some stuff like paranormal stuff like that has happened. Probably like the biggest paranormal thing that ever happened to me was, and I was hoping to talk about this, was a friend of mine had a shop, and he was a bike guy too, and his shop was obviously like, you know, like we live in New England, and New England has old factory buildings, obviously, and we all know somebody that has had a shop in a factory, probably, you know.
Yeah.
And they were always like old manufacturing buildings, whether, you know, whatever they manufactured, brass or whatever. And he lived, his shop and his apartment were in this building, which was the Sessions building. And the Sessions was a clock company, that I believe started in like the 1800s. And, you know, here in New England, obviously, you know, a lot of the old buildings were run on water, so they're always really close to like rivers or something like that because of factories. And his shop was on the second floor of the building, and I would go and like he would do machine work for me, or I would, you know, use his lathes and whatnot, and we would build bikes in his shop. And so I was there a lot. And I remember being there one day and him and hearing like metal wheeled carts upstairs,
Mm.
right? And being like, dude, like who's upstairs? Third floor, I had nothing in there. He's like, go upstairs, dude. So we go upstairs. He's like, come on, let's go upstairs. We go upstairs. There's nothing up there. Go back downstairs, you'd like hear carts. So I was pretty intrigued with just the building, and you'd always kind of see like shadows, you know what I mean? Like out of the side of your eye, like corner of your eye, you just kind of notice something or whatever the case may be. And and uh so we did some research. We found out that the building had a fire and that there was a bunch of people that died in the fire. And then Ritter, my buddy Ritter, he would talk to the ghosts all the time because he was there all the time, and he'd be like, "Hey, dude, what's up?" Like blah 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 blah, and and I'd be like, "Dude, that's so weird that you talk to like," and he's like, "One of these days, dude." He's like, so he went away on vacation down to Florida with his dad, and he had a bunch of plants in his shop. He was like into plants. So he's like, dude, can you come over to the shop and like water my plants for like the next 2 weeks? So I was like, yeah, no problem. So I went over to the house to water the plants, and he had a doorway that he cut from where his shop was into where his like living space was. And he had, because there was a wall between the two, so he cut like a doorway in the wall, and there was a hallway because the kitchen was on the other side of it. There was like in between like the windows and kind of this wall, and the water was obviously on the other side. So I got there, I watered a couple plants, I ran out of water, and I turned and I walked through this doorway, and right when I walked through, there was like this shape of a human being, dude, but it was like fuzz on a television, dude. And when I walked through this thing, and it was like super cold, and it was like I got immediate anxiety,
Mm.
like just like anxiety filled. It was the weirdest, strangest feeling. I almost like kind of like felt weak in the knees almost to some degree while I was passing through this thing. And I was like, that was fucked. Because I it was in one motion. I turned to walk, and as I was walking, I couldn't, I was
Yeah,
already in
right
motion.
there. Yeah, yeah.
And I immediately called him, and I was like, dude, I was like, I don't know what the fuck just happened, but something crazy just happened. And he was like, you saw the ghost? And I was like, I don't know what happened. And he was like, yo, he was like, it was like static on a television that like it was in the shape of a human being, right? And I was like, he described it, perfectly. And I was like, yeah, I walked through it. And he was like, oh shit, dude. He's like, I've never walked through it, but I see it all the time. And it doesn't really freak me out. Like that's why I talk, that's the dude that I talk to.
Mm.
So again, it was just, like this concreted like reinforcement of me not because I didn't explain it to him at all.
Yeah.
He told me what I had seen. I didn't say a word to him. I said, I think I just walked through the ghost. I said to him, and he was like, oh yeah, blah, like gives me this description, and then the description matches this entity of this thing that I walked through, and again, it was the weirdest thing. I like it was like I felt like flushed almost.
Mm. Did it like dissipate or disappear when you walked through it, or did it hang around?
I I was
Or did you not hang around?
I did not hang around, dude. I
Yeah,
got fucking really scared, and I just like walked into the other room, and then I just literally left.
yeah, yeah.
Just because like I was like, what the fuck just happened to me?
Sure.
Um, but that building, we would see there was a lot of paranormal stuff that happened in that building, you know. And a few other times, you know, we did some like scouting in the building down in the basement that had been locked for, you know, I mean, when the building caught on fire, the part that caught on fire, dude, it was a brick building. They just knocked all the bricks into the basement, and then they filled the building back up.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, and we would kind of go down and explore. And there was one room in this building, dude, that the whole floor of the it was a bathroom. The whole floor of the bathroom was full of pigeon bones, and the pigeons would fly into this room, and then they would never be able to leave. There was like a broken window, and they would fly in, and they were just dead. And there was like, you know, like 6 inches of pigeon bones inside this, you know, this room. I don't know what attracted them to that room, but they never would leave. And you know, like in the basement, uh, we would go down and explore in the basement, and there was a room in the basement that you would get this really weird feeling in this room, and it was kind of like a really, really old office, and there was a foot locker, and inside the foot locker was somebody's street clothes, like a pair of dress shoes and like a dress shirt and pants. Like they went to work and then they just never left. And as soon as you would walk through this doorway, the basement would be super like damp and humid, and you would walk into this one room, dude, and it was always like really cold and like really like sterile kind of feeling. And you know, and we'd always say, oh dude, that dude like went to work and never went home,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So yeah, there's always weird stuff, again, that kind of happened to me over the years. I mean, I think the weirdest was kind of the out of body experience, but with the ghost stuff, um, you know, everybody that was in the building was all friends of ours that was in the building, and they would always say like, you know, like weird, weird things, you know, would happen, or you would hear like all kinds of weird stuff that happened as far as like people walking that were in places that had nobody in there. They were locked with, you know,
Yeah.
behind doors that nobody would be there, or people yelling and there's nobody in the building. It would be like me and him in the whole building and nobody else there except for our buddy Jay that we grew up with. And there would be people like yelling and screaming, but there was nobody there because like you needed a key to get into the place, and only people that had spaces had keys.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I wonder, you know, a lot of these old mill buildings or these old factories in New England, um, you know, when we were kids, they were still there, and
Yeah,
now
yeah, yeah.
there doesn't seem to be as many of them around in that state. Now they're either knocked down, and stuff rebuilt on that land, or they're converted into like condos or apartments or
Yeah,
something. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
I
Yep,
just
yep.
wonder, it's like, you know, in these places that are now apartments and stuff, I wonder if that weird shit's still happening, right? You know?
I mean, you know, you would imagine this is still just a factory, kind of a factory building
Yeah,
with like workspaces in it. I don't
yeah,
know if it'll ever be, but
something
yeah,
else, yeah.
you have to want. I mean, you know, it makes complete sense. It's like, dude, if these people like never went home, they're still there. They, you know, they necessarily maybe can't get to where they need to get. They're just stuck in this, you know, vibration or this peer, you know, this plane where they you know they can never get out of it,
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
it's wild.
or leave. So you know, I mean, that's a lot of the, you know, the lot of, and there's always been weird stuff that's happened to me, and I just kind of discredit it, you know, where it's just like little stuff like, oh, that was weird, or you know, that's
Yeah,
weird, not anything that you would really like be able to point your finger at or even remember. But there's you know, it's always there. I feel like i've had I've been lucky enough to have a lot of experiences with kind of this stuff where people don't. And again, like I've always like taken it with a grain of salt to be like, did that shit really happen?
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, people are gonna listen to this podcast and be like, that dude's fucking crazy.
Nah, yeah, no, no, no. You know, because it's, you know, I've had a lot of people on talk about different experiences, and some are similar. You know what I mean? And you know, I think it's interesting because the more people I talk to and you hear about their experiences, there's a lot of overlap, and through so it makes you just wonder, like, I know we're
Yeah,
talking about a lot of different things here, but like, what is out there, like, um, and just in multiple ways, like, you know what I mean, like whether it's like, like you said, you had out of body experiences or experienced things with like a ghost or an entity, or just things like that, like what is going on out there, you know what I mean, like it's wild, because when you hear the same thing, and these people that don't know each other and from different parts of the country or the different parts of the world, are saying very similar things, it's hard to discount,
yeah, and I mean, is it something that like is inbred in us for thousands of years? I mean, I've done like a lot of research on like, you know, s- I was intrigued by. I've always been intrigued by like ancient civilizations and stuff like that. Like kind
Sure.
of on my own, just like and like Sumerians, and there's all these like weird texts, that like the Book of Enoch and stuff like that, where you're just like, like
The Emerald Tablets of Thoth.
yeah, it's like, dude, there's like,
I can't ever see
it's
that
like,
name. Thoth, Thoth, or whatever.
I'm not saying like these. I'm not saying like these people are, like not smart enough back then to be able to make something up, but it's like, a lot of the stuff, it's like, even with the stuff that, with me, it's like, why would I, like, why? I'm not like, I didn't,
Especially back then, because it's not like now, right? Like this is. I just want to compound on
yeah,
your,
yeah,
like, you had to go through a lot of fucking work back then to document something. So why would you
yeah,
document some bullshit, right? Like, whereas now you could just type an email or write a little letter or write a little note or whatever. But like these
right,
guys
right.
had to, like, you had to spend days or weeks or months like inscribing something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
like,
you're not going to do it lightly, I don't think. Or I would assume you're not going to do it lightly.
no, and people
These were
like,
just some jackasses that were like, "Hey, some dudes are gonna find this 10,000 years from now or five
no,
thousand years from now, and make a
no, they're,
religion out of it." Yeah,
and I agree with you 100%. Why would they do it if, for example, yes, I understand there's fables, but like, to me, I feel like a lot of this stuff is begins as a true story,
yeah.
and then it gets blown out of proportion or taken out of context, because it's like, like as it travels down the line, people get the story mixed up.
Oh
But
yeah,
but
they
again,
add a little bit to it, make it more interesting or whatever,
yeah,
or
but
there's
like
an agenda to make it go a certain way, or
yeah, yeah,
all the
exactly,
human shit, of
right.
embellishment for whatever reason.
But like the Book of Enoch, I mean, like that, for example, is, you're talking about a civilization that's like 12,000 years old, right?
Yeah,
And it's like this dude goes into depth about these angels that came and took them, and what they taught him and what their particular roles were, as far as teaching him language and mathematics, and all these different things, like how to farm and all this different stuff. And it's like, why?
yeah,
Like, wouldn't the dude just be like, yeah, this is, like, I learned this from my dad, or whatever the case may be? Like, why would you go into like some crazy embellishment of like why this would be it,
yeah.
to me, it doesn't really make much sense as to why.
Sure, and it's
You
and it's
know?
like, and to go even further back with the Sumerians and the cuneiform tablets talking about Anunnaki and whatnot, and the
Yeah,
same,
yeah, yeah.
same type of things, like where these things came down and showed us this or did this or were involved in these wars, like People weren't writing the theme of Star Wars on like a movie script like
No,
in Sumeria, right? Like they were documenting things that were important enough to document, to go through all that trouble of documenting
yeah,
it.
on
Only a
stone,
certain amount of people wrote, for
right.
one,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah. On
two,
stone tablets that they
yeah,
knew would be like, oh, dude, well, if we write this in the sand, dude, it's gonna get blown away. Like we
yeah,
write it, or clay tablets that were like, that they knew would last for long periods of time. Just taking everything away from that, with the Anunnaki and all that stuff, taking everything away from it. Okay, why in the world for 10,000 years have we been, as human beings, been so enamored by gold?
yeah.
Like, this is what I think of. Why? You can't eat gold, so ancient people couldn't eat it. They can't make tools out of it. It's a soft
Oh,
metal that doesn't do anything. Yeah, it conducts electricity, but you're talking at a time, maybe there was electric batteries, maybe there wasn't. But you could also use, brass or copper for that as well. So why are we so fixated on gold?
yeah.
If you take everything away from, strip everything away from this, and you just say Anunnaki came here for gold, they 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 made human beings to work for them, semi-intelligent beings to work for them, right? To mine this ore, this gold.
Yeah.
What, like, why do why why do ancient why do Aztecs give a fuck about gold, dude? Gold didn't do anything for them.
No. Did have you do you have any physical gold like coins
I
or
do.
anything?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have physics.
It's wild, right? Like when you hold it. Like I'm not one for like gold jewelry or anything, but like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have a few like gold coins and silver and stuff, and it's like you just want to touch it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I keep it in the bags and stuff because I don't want to get like
Yeah, but you're
handed
like
already.
enamored by it, right?
Yeah, you need to touch it and feel it, and you're like, like it's like a very gold fever is real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyone that has gold like can attest to that, whether it's on your neck or like in your hand as a coin, but especially when it's like a coin. I don't know why, like when it's like a
Yeah, I mean, it's just a
coin or a
physical.
bullion or something,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
it's like a physical, or even like, even if you have like a nugget of gold,
yeah, yeah,
or like, and it's like you feel the weight of it and you have this thing, but in all reality, what the fuck, like, gold doesn't do shit until recent years of them using it in, in
technology, yeah,
technology. It doesn't really do anything for it. It didn't do anything. Yeah, it was a currency and whatnot, but in
yeah, and it was like
reality,
decorative, type of thing for
yeah, but why do we hold it in such high regards?
yeah,
Why does somebody that have gold is a king compared to a petty person? Like, where does that come from? Because silver is awesome and
yeah,
platinum is awesome. And, all these other metals that are precious metals. Why gold? Why is gold still more expensive than platinum and silver? Like,
yeah,
what? Like, the only reason why gold is more expensive is because people want gold.
yeah,
So, I mean, I've always thought about that, where it's like, why do we have this? Why are we fixated on gold? And it makes sense that if we were programmed at some time to mine gold for another civilization or another race, that we would be enamored by it, because that's what they programmed us to do.
yeah.
They're like, dude, you have to dig this stuff because this stuff is important. You're like, oh, this is important, I have to do it.
Okay, yeah. This is it's good. Yeah, yeah, no, it's wild, man. I wish, like, if you had a time machine, like, where would you go? Like, you know what I mean? Would you go to the future? Would you go to the past? Like, where? Like,
I would go to the past. I don't,
yeah,
I like, because I want to I would want to understand all this stuff that's not explained.
yeah,
Definitely, I would want to go back to like Sumerian. I would want to go back to, Egypt.
yeah,
That whole you know uh, that whole part of the world. Like, I
yeah,
think that's obviously where, like, civilization started.
sure,
I mean, everything kind of goes back to that. but also like kind of uh connect the dots of where where it's being like there's many cultures that have done the same thing. Why did they do it? I fully believe that ancients traveled more than we think they did.
Yeah.
Like back then, and like I think
People didn't spontaneously stop making pyramids all over the world. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like
exactly. It's like
Mexico was very far from Egypt and
right,
you know,
and
Indonesia or wherever, you know?
and why are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Why would you do it? Like what is the significance of a pyramid? Buildings aren't built in pyramids now, so it's
Yeah.
not like it's the structure of it. There's other structures that were built, so why a pyramid?
Yeah.
Is it energy? Is it I mean, uh is it some way uh to communicate? Is it communication? Whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
you
Wow.
know. And I think a lot of this stuff is older than what people and scientists think. And the reason I think it is they they don't want to discredit what they think,
Yeah.
what scientists have thought and taught all this stuff, and then they
Oh
go,
no.
oh,
Yeah.
we can't be wrong.
Yeah,
They
they don't wanna have to rewrite it, yeah. Which is
Yeah,
weird because that's the whole thing of science is, like, you make scientific discoveries and you adjust what you know, and then you go from there. But, yeah, there's a lot with that. Did you I don't know if you it was pulled from YouTube right away, so, it's not on there, but if you hear the last episode, if not, I can send it to you with this guy, Todd Cave. We got into a lot of this stuff, so I think
did
you'd
you?
be into that one, yeah, like, he went in, like, I probably said 10 words the whole episode, man. He was just going like, and
I,
he
yeah,
goes,
I didn't. You'll have to definitely send it to
yeah,
me.
I'll send it to you. He goes in hard on that stuff, but
I mean, I think a lot of that. I think a lot of it is real. I mean, I don't think we're necessarily alone. Again, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like it would be
what's your
off.
feelings on this disclosure stuff going on, or like
The what?
the disclosure, like with because when you say we're not alone, bringing up the alien stuff, like, do you feel like this disclosure stuff is real, or do you feel it's like a psyop?
No, I mean, I believe to some degree. I mean, I believe that a lot of it is real because, again, I don't think that, to say that we're alone is awfully selfish of human beings. You
Sure,
know, I
yeah,
mean,
arrogant, yeah,
yeah, it's very arrogant, and it's super selfish to think that that's the case. So I feel like, um, I feel I feel a lot of it is unexplainable, and I think people in power don't like to not have control and eh, not be able to explain stuff.
yeah,
Regardless of what the truth of the matter is. It's like, um, and even going back to the Sumerian thing, where you see some of these texts, and it's like, I don't mean to keep going back to that, but it's like they, I watched something where they were saying that these scientists took like this map of the universe of I mean the map of our solar system, right?
yeah,
And they had a map of the solar system. Now all the planets, they go into depth to what the planets look like, right?
oh yeah, I've seen
Faces
that,
of the planet. So
yeah,
then they look at it, they say there's obviously 10 planets. you know Scientists have recently found that they think that there's another planet because Uranus is it Uranus or Pluto? One of the two is like super gas. They thought it was all ice, but it's gas. So they're saying that there has to be another planet that circles around that to keep that in orbit. So,
yeah,
but these scientists took the map that they had, and they like knowing time, and like on the computer and being able to like manipulate time. They took and programmed this map into it, and then they rewound it to 10 or 12,000 years of like Sumerians, and the planets are
Oh,
all in
that's
the order that they were in 10,000 years ago.
yeah.
But telescopes have not. Telescopes are what, 1,000 years old, maybe 1,200 years old. So it's like, how do you explain? Dude, there's no possible way that some dude just said, I'm gonna make a map of what I think is fucking real.
Yeah.
Like,
No, there's so much weird stuff, man. And then even if you get into like, this is like a step removed from what you're talking about. Like you see all these like old not hieroglyphs, but like old carvings and stuff, and they have all these entities and they all have a watch on and they're holding a bag and it's all the same one. And it's like,
yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
is going on? What was all that? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of weird stuff that is like cross cultures like that in time frames that
yeah,
is
and and people always, and people or scientists will say, well, like, that's a interpretation of blah 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 blah. But like,
yeah,
when you think about these people, if they saw something, like Aztecs, right? Their art was Aztec art. Okay, like let's bring it into modern day, right? Graffiti is all different, but graffiti's the same, right? Graffiti is dudes spray painting on a wall, or women, people spray painting on a wall. It's letters of their name. Okay, it might differ somewhat, but it is the same thing. So it's like Aztecs are going to do artwork that is Aztec art. They're not going to make something that looks like something like, we'll say, a rocket ship, because they can only interpret their artwork what is as their artwork.
yeah, what they're seeing in life.
Yeah, so like their interpretation through art is whatever you see. Just like the
Yeah,
Native Americans, like painting in like the caves and stuff. You can kind of tell what the stuff is, but like it's their interpretation of it. So
sure.
it's like, how do you explain a lot of this stuff? How do you explain some dude sitting in some chamber and then he's got like this thing that looks like oxygen,
Yeah,
coming into
looks
his
like
nose that
astronaut helmet and this and
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah, that
the
no other
rocket, the controls,
yeah,
and
yeah,
this
nothing,
rocket.
not
They're showing the
right.
exhaust and stuff. Like,
But no other art that they have like models the same thing. I
yeah,
mean, the art style is the same, but not, it's not like you see it in every single thing where you see animals, like animals are always like a constant thing, obviously, in ancient times. You always see animals. It's like,
yeah,
even in Egyptian stuff, it's always the same gods, the same thing. But then you have this one thing that's just this weird thing, and they're like, no, dude, that's not that. We
yeah,
interpreted it as this, and you're like, but there's nothing else that remotely looks like that
yeah.
in their
Yeah,
artwork. Although the style is the same, it just doesn't make any sense.
yeah. And it's like
So
to even bring it forward and on a kind of different note, but still, there's so many paintings from like Renaissance area or like
yeah,
medieval times that have like UFOs in the painting. Like, what the
yeah,
fuck was
yeah,
that? Like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
wild.
exactly. They
Like,
don't even
like
know,
not even
like,
like blatant like flying saucer looking motherfuckers. Like, you know
right,
what I mean? It's like
right.
crazy.
They don't even know. It's like, what, there's why would they be in the picture? There's
Yeah,
nothing that floated in the air back then. It's not like there was like zeppelins and
yeah,
they were
yeah.
like, oh, a zeppelin was flying by. They're just like, no,
And if
dude, like,
and if they painted a zeppelin, you would see it as a zeppelin. You would know.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
And these paintings are like paintings that are legitimate things that are like it's not like a loose interpretation. I
Yeah,
mean, I get some of them have gods and stuff like that, but a lot of like the
sure.
Renaissance
I'm
paintings
just talking
were,
about when it's like a painting of a woman, and then you just see a flying saucer in the
yeah,
corner.
yeah, it's like this like Victorian like woman,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
all of a sudden in the sky there's like a something floating in the sky. You're like, oh, dude, that's not a coincidence. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
That's
know,
wild.
that lady has nothing to do with,
Yeah,
that interpretation is like an interpretation of what the artist saw probably at that time and was like,
it was
I'm gonna
striking
put
enough
the thing.
to document it forever in the painting. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I believe in a lot of that stuff. I mean, you know, like I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of dude. I'm more or less like, you know, logical about stuff. But
Yeah,
again, like you know, I think they never released this stuff because, you know, of all the hype and people would get fucking, you know, crazy and lose their minds, like you know,
yeah,
like like War of the Worlds type shit,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, it's wild. Here's a question I have for you because I think it'd be a good one for you to throw at you. I'm interested to hear what you would say because it's kind of like the time travel question. If you could get into the Vatican archives and they said, all right, you can look up and find the answer to one thing.
What would that one thing be?
Yeah, what would be the main thing you'd be like, all right, let me go, because you know they got all kinds of shit there.
Probably the one thing that I think I would look up would be, oh man, that's a tough question.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
It doesn't have
the
to be the final answer, but what would be
no,
one of
no, no. The one thing I think that I would look up would probably be the history of speech. Would be which is seems boring, or language, but it would
yeah,
be the history of language because there's no history of language. And how did human beings learn to? They say we went from grunts to being able to communicate with one another. It's not possible.
yeah,
Like it's so when you look at it's as easy as this. When you look at Asian languages and writing, there's no scientists say there's no direct link to Latin or to any other languages. It's a
yeah.
language that's separate from from every. There's not one letter. There's not one
Sure.
sound that can cross over to it being um, a link between the two. So where
Yeah.
did it come from?
Yeah.
And it had to have been taught
Yeah,
to
and
us.
then it's like, and if that's that one, where did these other ones did language just spontaneously occur on different continents at different times
It,
and evolve, you know?
yeah, it's not possible. Like
Yeah,
to me. So that being said leads into where did it come from?
yeah,
You know, like in the bigger picture. So I think if I was to ask that question, then that question would lead to what was the extraterrestrials that brought the language.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
kind of like it would kind of be like a two-part question
yeah,
to be like, oh, dude, by me asking this question, I know what I'm going to find out. Instead of being like, hey, is there aliens? Is there extraterrestrials?
yeah, yeah.
It would be like a kind of a answer, you know, two-part
Yeah,
answer
yeah,
to a
you
question.
found a way to get a 2 for 1.
Yeah, and
Get
some
a
to some
twofer out of
degree.
it, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah, man. Cool. I mean, here's the thing, we could talk about this stuff
I
all
know
night.
we could talk about this all night. And
Uh,
like the last time,
yeah.
I mean, I think I disclosed enough of my personal shit that people are gonna. I'm gonna be hearing about this for probably the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but again, it's all stuff that I can't prove. You know, and again, you know, I mean, if anything, I'm obviously not the only one. Like you said, you know, there's a lot of links between what, you know, people that I've talked to kind of and have not. You know, a lot of people say like, you know, you can you know, you're able to contact, you know, through meditation and long meditation, you're able to contact, you know, different frequencies and other beings through that. And I haven't explored that yet. I just can't get myself to do much meditating, but in the future I would, you know, I'd like to. But again, I also don't. I can't say that it did or it didn't happen. So
yeah,
I'm not gonna like, you know, I'm not gonna like. I'm not going to say any of this stuff is real. It's a perception and an experience that I had. I mean, if this helps somebody else with an experience, then I mean, I'm glad to have
Yeah.
done it, you know.
And no matter what, I always go back to life is more interesting when you look at weird stuff like that's happened to people, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's
Yep.
more out there, and you don't want to lose it in the mundane day to day. All like all obviously we're a couple days after the election. That's all people have been talking about
Yeah,
all week.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? It's like, all right, cool. Like, all right, it's over. Like, you know what I mean? There's other shit going on. You know
Yeah,
what I
there
mean?
is other stuff, and there's deeper stuff. I think,
Yeah,
again, I think people just rely on the face value of things and don't really,
yeah.
put a lot of stuff out of their mind. I mean, I'm glad that I could come on the podcast and talk about these experiences, regardless of whether whatever. But
Yeah. And it's
but
just
yeah, I mean,
the world's more interesting than what you see on CNN or Fox
dude,
or
dude,
MSNBC or
there's
or
there's a
CBS
there's
or
a
ABC.
whole there's a whole universe out there, dude. And I'll say this on this is on my final note is what I'm gonna say is this. Always remember, dude, that the universe does not give a fuck about you. There's all kinds of stuff happening that you need to be in tune with, and don't think that anything that the universe is happening. The universe is huge. We're minuscule in this big thing that's happening, that even when you zoom out from the country, from the earth, like, yeah, we're happening and we're here, but like, you got to keep in mind, like, to have an open mind to anything that's going on, just because we're floating on a rock through darkness, dude.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh shit. And yeah, on that note, I think he I don't know what just happened there, but yeah. So, keep it locked. Stay weird. All right.